Well, isn't it something that here we are, episode 11. Who would have thought we'd come this far, Sarah?
Right?
So to our listeners, I have plans of doing, I don't know, upwards of 2, 3, 4, maybe 500 podcasts. I just have that many ideas of things we're going to talk about. But today I need to land on completing this piece that we've been talking about. And that's with birth order leading into family, leading into dysfunctional family, and understanding the roles that children end up feeling they need to play in a family that is out of balance because they can't be themselves. They can't be open, spontaneous, giggly, ridiculous, naughty, whatever it is, because kids do it all. And they're supposed to do it all. And parents who are able to attend to them can set themselves aside and guide their kids and not have these personal reactions that get so outrageous and do all kinds of emotional damage to children.
Right? They're forced into these specific roles for the family to function,
Yeah.
for things to continue to go. You can't have that wide spectrum of behavior or emotions in a family like this.
Yeah. Probably the biggest thing that I see is that when you have that impaired person, or, in some cases, unfortunately for some kids, both parents are impaired.
Right.
That's really a bummer. The biggest thing that I see is working with people who are not allowed to be spontaneous. They had to be so careful in what they did, and then they'd get along in a track of these are the acceptable things that I can do. And that track is still limiting their choices as an adult because they've not allowed themselves to get outside the box that they grew up in.
Yeah. Well, that to be spontaneous, that takes a certain level of safety.
Oh, yeah.
Like that doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
a
crazy.
safety and security that you carry within yourself. I do think that people look for that feeling of safety and security, or as Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Buddhist monk that is incredible, as he says, we look for home, the experience of home. One of my favorite quotes from Thich Nhat Hanh is, "I have arrived, I am home." Home is something you carry inside of yourself. It's an exhale of all is well. And the kids in these families, and then the adults who emerge from this, do not have that. They don't have an exhale, so they're looking to create home. And of course, you can't find home outside of yourself.
Right.
So discovering yourself can be a really complicated process at first, because so much of what we believe about ourselves is based on what we were essentially told we could be, or what the family needed us to be. Even if it seems a little bit ridiculous that the family needed that, but we're all looking to create that balance and to look up from what you were told, and it gets deep into the brain, and actually become aware of your surroundings now, can be a really difficult thing for people to do. I mean, to climb out of that and examine it, because it's not right there for you to examine. It skips around your consciousness, just skipping and skipping around. So you actually need to be in conversation with someone who helps you, or you need to be listening to a podcast like this, something that helps you to realize that these little things that are skipping around are things that you need to attend to, even if it's painful. So, as we've discussed, with an impaired person in a marriage, or with two impaired people, the family then is looking for balance and looking to absorb the impairment that's happening. The balance of the entire family is out of whack, and the children that arrive in a family like this have to adapt to what's happening. When you are 6 years old, as we've said, you can't move out.
Right.
You don't, plus it wouldn't even occur to you that you could. But, some kids run away, and many times when a kid says, I'm going to run away, it's kind of a cute thing, whatever. But some kids they're looking to run away because is there another place for me to be? But the biggest thing is that the parents are preoccupied with other things and not able to focus on what's happening for a child, much less get to know them. So as we've talked about, we have the hero and we have the scapegoat. That's what we've talked about so far. And now we're going to move on to another survival response that, like the others, the family needs or the child chooses because they want to feel safe. And that next role is the lost child. This is a child that when a family comes into my office, they'll be talking about, oh, this one just makes so much trouble, and oh, we're so proud of, and you know what, they were so busy because they're the captain of the football team or the head of student council, they couldn't come. And we didn't need to make them come because they're so good. We had nothing to worry about there. Of course, they're talking about the hero. The scapegoat's there, like, sneering at me. And, then maybe there's another child who's sitting there quietly, just looking down, and just trying to be invisible. And that is the lost child. And the statement they make about that child is, no worries there. I don't even have to think about her. I mean, I never give him a thought. He's just always in his room or reading a book or gone. He loves to be outside doing things. And he's not here at all. And it's just so great. I don't even have to think about him or her. When I hear this, and I've heard it too many times, my heart drops. I think, you have a child and you're glad you don't have to think about that child. And I know then we have a lost child.
Right. And in this case, it's not so much what the family does with this child, it's more what they don't do. Because he or she's just the quiet child they don't have to worry about, so there's no need to really put any extra energy or effort into, like you said, getting to know who that child is.
Or attending to them.
Yeah.
The neglect is rather stunning. I remember this adult who told me that when she was like 8 years old, she so knew that her mother never even looked at her. She put on just a bizarre outfit to wear to school and went out to the kitchen where her mom was and said, what do you think? Do you think this is okay? And her mom said, oh yeah, you look great. That's good enough, that's good. And she said, Mom, look at me, look at me. And she said, my mom never even looked to see if my hair was combed or my outfit. It didn't matter. I just was to stay out of the way. That's what the family needed. And then there's another story that I want to tell about another lost child. That was really a moving story. This is many years ago, and I'm going to call this woman Pam. Pam grew up in a family where dad was abusive, probably drank, don't know for sure, but Pam thought, yeah, there was probably drinking involved. Mom was just trying to not be there and absorb and make everything as okay as possible because dad would explode and you never knew when or why. And she said she heard one of her brothers who especially got dad's wrath. She would hear him being beaten in another room, which was terrifying to her. Not that her other brothers, she had 3 brothers, not that her other brothers didn't get hit too, but this one, who I'm sure was the scapegoat, was beaten on a regular basis. He eventually, incidentally, grew up and ended up with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. You got to wonder if it was schizophrenia or really what all happened with regard to the beatings. And she didn't know. But she said she would spend her time in her room, just staying as away from everybody as she possibly could. When she came out to the living room, she said, and her dad was in the living room, she remembered she was like 4 years old, this memory was from. And she would walk along the wall of the living room and watch him the whole time. And he would laugh at her. Oh, what are you doing? Oh, aren't you there? What are you doing walking along the wall like that? And she said she would just walk along the wall. And she thought, wow, something's really wrong with me. Why do I do this? And of course, it's a no-brainer why she did it. She knew, don't take your eyes off of him. You don't want to get beaten. But she just stayed away. She tried to never speak. In fact, in session, she had a hard time learning how to talk. It's not like people like this come in, sit down and chat and tell me their stories. Right. I have to really work with them to give them the language. I'm not one of those therapists who says, hey, how does that make you feel? Oh, tell me, blah, blah, blah. I give them the language so that they can talk about these things.
Yeah. Which makes perfect sense because these kids spend so much time alone that they don't learn how to communicate or how to interact with other people, which as they get older and into school and college and adult life, that creates a lot of issues. And like you're saying, that it's hard to even get them to have that conversation or to put words to what they've experienced.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes, do you think, Sarah, that maybe they just turn into some of the quiet doormats that you see?
Right, yeah. No, there's no doubt about that they're very quiet. They kind of avoid some of that closeness and just kind of would rather kind of fly under the radar.
Yeah. And so if they marry an abusive person who hurts their children, what are they going to do?
Right. They're not going to be able to intervene.
Yeah. They're certainly not going to speak up. They're going to get quieter.
Yeah.
And they're going to try to quietly make up for it. I mean, it's just such a painful position in the family. Of course, these kids, adults, are prone to depression, as they have no outlet, no way of talking. And the reason my heart sinks when I hear that statement, I don't even have to think about, I never think about her, I never think about him, is that they're the most likely to be suicidal, even in that moment as a child. And so if they end up bullied, again, they're going to fall into depression and possibly become suicidal. One man told me a story of how he would just completely stay away from his family, so much so that one time when he hurt himself and needed a Band-Aid, he went to somebody else's house because he knew that mom would give him a Band-Aid and be nice to him. And he remembers it vividly, how nice this mom was to him. And if he'd gone home, his mother would have been irritated with him because his role in the family was to never bother her, essentially not be alive.
Yeah. And through that learns not to expect anything from other people, because when you grow up with your needs not being met, you learn that you have to meet them yourself, or in that case, luckily you have that neighbor.
Or just ignore your needs.
Or ignore them.
Yeah, and then it's really difficult to assert on any level. So finally, there's the mascot. And that usually, as you reminded me earlier, is the youngest in the family. Not always, but usually. Because good grief, what do we got going on in this family? And now here I am. Now I arrive. And so what does the mascot do? I'm cute, I'm funny, I tease, I'm adored, and I'm tolerated often, even by the impaired parent.
And sometimes irritating.
Yeah, well, very irritating, often, to the other kids in the family. But within the family, it's this, cutesy, and the other kids in the family often experience the mascot as they can get away with anything. They're spoiled.
Yeah.
I remember my youngest, blah, 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 was spoiled. I have people say that to me, and I look at them and I go, in the family that you grew up in, no one was spoiled. What the heck does spoiled mean? Isn't that a funny word?
It is a
You
funny
were
word.
spoiled because you were given the time of day? You weren't beaten? I mean, it's just really odd when, or lucky you got more of the impaired person's attention. That's going to fill you with poison.
Right.
That's not being... I just don't know what it means when somebody says they were spoiled. I think just not thinking that through.
Clearly.
Yeah. So the mascot can be told that I had a woman who was told that when she was born, her dad stopped drinking. You were the reason he stopped. Hey, no pressure there to be, special or funny or cute or, no pressure there. You made mom feel happier. And they believe that that's their whole role. So who knows how bright they might be. They might be as able to achieve as the hero, but they're not going to find out because in class...
They're not going to develop that side. They're going to develop...
No, in class they're going to be really funny.
Yeah.
They're going to be busy taking that role right on into the classroom. Mm-hmm. So what else would you add about the mascot, Sarah?
I would say the mascot's very hypersensitive to stress. So whenever, Whenever a tense moment comes up in the home or something, creates even the slightest bit of uncomfortableness, that's when you're going to see, that funny behavior or the irritating behavior, whichever.
And you know what's just occurring to me right now?
What's that?
In talking about the mascot, is how people recreate these roles in workplaces. Boy, there's a podcast, Sarah. I mean, you have people who grew up in these different roles, and we unwittingly come in and we bring that with us. So that quiet person that you never see who's down the hall and they keep to themselves, and then you've got a scapegoat who starts to make fun of them, or the mascot who just can't stop saying stupid stuff at the meeting. Shut up. And then you've got the hero who steps up and they're going to save the day, but everybody gets so they resent the hero too. Knock it off. We don't need you to save the day.
Yeah.
People will come in and tell me how something recreates over and over and over again in their workplace. And of course, it's this role that they bring with them. Now, what happens as you get older and you attempt to maybe get married or be in a relationship, whether a really close friendship or a romantic relationship, is that I don't know who I am. And it seems too scary to find out who I am. So anytime you attempt to really get to know me, or if you ask me a sensitive, very personal question, which we don't do enough of in our society, I'm just sometimes shocked how people come in and I'll say something to them and they'll say, I've never thought of that. No, I don't. I've never thought of that. And I think, wow, you've never thought of that. And some of these are not big time questions. I've just begun. I'm still holding way back in terms of what I'm going to talk about with you. I've never, ever. And so it's like we build a wall and we live on the superficial side of the wall. And so what happens in then an intimate relationship? Well, the other person would like to get to know you beyond the wall.
And I think of all the roles, the mascot probably has the biggest wall.
Ooh.
Because there's such a distinct difference between, how they're presenting to how they're actually, there's a lot of loneliness behind that mask or that wall.
And they seem so funny, so friendly,
Right.
so irritating, so like they don't care what people think.
Right.
But underneath, they really do. So you're right. Of course, any of the roles can move into depression and being suicidal. Mm-hmm. And that mascot, the life of the party person, can have, and just the loudest person. And of course, they become off-putting, which then they don't have much of a social life as they become more and more annoying.
Right. Because as a kid, that immaturity is probably appreciated by your classmates. But as you move into adulthood, that immaturity becomes more of an impactful thing in your relationships. Yeah. People don't find it quite as funny.
Right. Or your spouse doesn't.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, who wants to really be married to Peter Pan? Mm-hmm. Not taking any responsibility for the finances, not taking any responsibility for keeping the house really running. The lawn needs to be mowed, the kids need to get to school, and you just take off and you go to your job and you're oblivious to the other things that need to occur, and your partner is picking up all of the slack and probably all the stuff on the floor all of the time because you can't focus on that and you've got to stay in your role. So some of the things that I see that we develop coming from dysfunctional families that really get in the way, and these are just things that I think of when I think of, okay, so what do people bring in? They're not able to show emotion. I can't go beyond just superficial emotion.
Yeah, don't get too personal.
Yeah, don't get personal. And you think, okay, so we're married, but don't get personal. And yet, what do I want most of all? I want you to know me, but I'm so programmed to push you away. Sarcasm is really popular because that'll, oh, you just need me, and it's just you, it's not me, all that kind of stuff. Withdrawing, avoiding conflict, clamming up, but of course communication is like nowhere to be found. triggers that bring about a lot of anger and fear and escapes. You see people, I don't know what to do, so I lose myself into work, I lose myself into alcohol, I lose myself into food, I lose myself into infidelity. This is too hard. You're awful. I don't want to be with you. So I'm going to go over here where I feel good, and this person likes my facade,
Right.
my public persona.
And there's less stress
Yeah,
with that
less
other person.
stress. I'm
Anything
just
that
gonna
causes
move away.
stress, yep, you're
Yep.
going to go find an area where there's less.
Yeah. So this drives a whole lot of things that are hard in our lives. Again, daring to begin to know your story, to actually think about where you come from, is what this is all about. Self-awareness demands that we know our story, that we understand how we were wounded, how we're still wounded, owning that problem that is ours, and realizing that when we're in relationship with somebody, we're not actually bumping into the other person, we are bumping into ourselves. And what are you going to do about you? And yes, you do need to be with somebody who also wants to know themselves. As you get to know yourself, and sometimes when one person comes in and they're doing really, really good work in terms of getting to know themselves, I think, should I call their husband, their wife, and say, things are about to shift for you. You might want to come take a seat and get to know who you are. Right. Because we're going to upset the balance of things. And, often the person coming in, the other spouse is saying, well, you need to do that. You need to blah, blah, blah. But then as they shift, the person they're with has to shift too. Because there's a reason that you married somebody who has this obvious impairment.
Right.
But it's all good if you'll do it. And the greatest thing you can get in a relationship is somebody who's willing to get to know themselves at the same time that you're getting to know yourself. That's a great offer.
Absolutely.
So, you don't want to live for your family. You can't do that. Where's my quote?
I was going to say,
Sarah,
did
that
you have
I
a
told
quote,
you
Mary?
about?
That,
I have a
as you were
quote,
talking,
don't I? Yeah.
That reminded me. Yeah.
This is from Mama Luna. A little reminder that you're not responsible for the healing and happiness of your mother, father, or siblings. You can inspire them and lead by example, but you cannot make them choose a better path. Stop wasting your energy or you'll burn out. Live your life, not theirs. So the true definition of family is that it's not necessarily blood. It's being with people who honor and respect you and share in your joy and the joy of your life. And that's the true meaning of a family connection. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily blood.
Right, right. All right.
I'm pointing at
You
her.
want my wrap up? So, like Mary mentioned in the beginning, this wraps up the roles that we've been talking about. And my hope is that you've listened to all of them, for one, mm-hmm. and for two, that it has been thought-provoking and possibly started you on a journey of increasing your self-awareness and starting to, have an interest and a desire to figure out maybe why you do the things that you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So.
And of course, we'll be returning to all kinds of aspects of this in later podcasts, but this kind of completes at least the outline of some of the family stuff. So really begin to give it some thought. You could sit down and you could write, okay, so what was my dad like? And write the traits of your dad. What was my mom like? And write the traits of your mom. And what did my dad want me to be when I grew up? What did my mom want me to be when I grew up? You can begin to tune into it just by asking yourself some basic questions like that. What are the traits that I have that are similar to my dad? What are the traits that I have that are similar to my mom? And what are the things that I don't like about dad that I also don't like about myself? And what does all of this mean? You know, in terms of what did I agree to be in the family that I grew up in? And is that still what I am? Is that really who I am? Is that still what I want to be now that I have a choice? You know, to realize that you actually have a choice. It's huge.
I think that's a great takeaway to leave listeners with. Those are some great questions.
She loves it.
It's my favorite. But as you were saying that, one last thing that I would say is, begin to take those roles that you chose unconsciously, and then through this self-awareness, be able to choose your future role consciously.
And you will have to work with your mind a lot. You're going to have to build up affirmations that you say to yourself. And you need to say them over and over and over again so that they completely register within your mind. It's not stupid to be saying good affirmations to yourself, to look in the mirror and look at yourself and say, you're a good person, you're worth it. I mean, all of those things. And I know that it sounds corny, and there have been some great send-ups that stand-up comedians have done. And yet, if you spend 5 minutes each day thinking good, positive things about yourself, it will take you a long way. So, remember to live your life with intention, passion, and purpose. Until next time.